We're up to our entire interview with Stuart Epps, the engineer-producer who's worked with so many great names, Led Zeppelin on the Coda album. He thought he was going to be working on the new Led Zeppelin album, but then John Beaudin died. He talks about that in this clip. Working with Jimmy Page, Paul Rodgers, The Firm, Robbie Williams, of course, Elton John, Bernie Taupin, Twisted Sister, and a lot more in this long segment. It's actually 2 interviews. Our chat, part 1 with Stuart Epps. You know, I've been in radio 40 years. Now and then I'll do an interview and I'll forget to press that little red button.
I did an interview with someone for 2 hours and I said, "You did get that, did you?" And he went, "Oh, shit, hang on a minute. No, I didn't."
A few artists have let me do it again. There's some YouTubers who are going on and they have the titles of their videos, and I know you'll appreciate this, are "New Music Sucks." And I understand why they say it. I don't get excited like I did because there's still record stores here in Canada. I don't get excited like I used to walking into a record store. I've listened, you know, I've been reading your website and, you know, the Sgt. Pepper's, the White Album. I mean, all that excitement, that fervor that would happen. But you're working with new artists. I know this is a long question. You're working with new artists. It's not the same, but what's your reaction when people say new music sucks?
Well, I just think, I don't know what they're listening to. I don't know what they're listening to, but I mean, you know, it's nice to be chatting to you from Cookham in Berkshire all that way to Canada. New music sucks. Well, sucks isn't a word we use over here anyway. It has a completely different connotation. And what is new music? That's the thing. I think that's what the question is. So my answer to that is because of my long history in the music business, I'm amazed at how little music has really changed. And I often say this. I say, on the one hand, I'm very grateful for it because young bands, if you ask them what's their favorite band, are likely to say Led Zeppelin or Bad Company or another band that I've worked with. On the other hand, I find it sad that there hasn't been some sort of amazing, you know, music that's completely taken over, but then I'd be out of a job. So obviously I am pleased, but I would say music has changed very little, really. So what is new music? That's the thing. I guess you'd have to say some of the genres that, to be honest, I don't like very much, which would be heavy metal, which would be people screaming down microphones, which would be some of the rap that's full of swear words and not much musical content at all. It's not really even music. So over here, you know, we've got an artist called Ed Sheeran, and we've, you know, you've got to say he's new music. But the fact is, if you study what he's written and what he records, it's rejigged Beatles. That's what it is. So the music now that's being made, which is still going down extremely well, and also with kids, is a bit like it's old music presented. That's what it is. So I guess for kids, obviously, it's new to them. But for us old timers, we've heard it all before. This is just a different way of presenting it. So it's not really new music. And, you know, what's incredible, actually, is that I get demos from new bands or from new artists, and somehow, after all these years, people can still come up with a different chord progression and a different voice sound and a different sound that just gets you going again, and you go, wow, I love that to bits. You know, it's not like I've never heard it before. And of course, it's not quite like listening to the Beatles' White Album, or Sgt. Pepper, or even some of Elton's stuff, where I think we were actually making music that was completely new, you know, and new productions, new sound. But, you know, that new music sucks. No, I'm not into that.
What do you look for? I mean, I've heard you, I've watched a lot of your interviews, and I get the Zeppelin quote as far as people are going, well, you know, that was a lot of years ago, but has anyone touched that? But that's normal. That's going to happen in any industry. You're going to get the pinnacle, and in sports, it happens an awful lot that, you know, the goalposts change and maybe the stats change because the game's changed. What do you look for when people send you tapes?
What keeps me going is people sending me new music, which, the story is that with the invention of the internet, which obviously sounds ridiculous, but to me it wasn't that long ago. So now, and also with the invention of people having home studios, which to me also isn't that long ago. So everyone's furiously recording at home. Very few bands, artists are going to commercial studios. I got fed up with trying to tell them, well, we got to go here, we got to go there, we got to go to Abbey Road, we got to do this. So, all right, so, if you can't beat them. So I said, all right, send me what you're doing at home. Let me have a listen. And I listened to it, because actually recording at home, in home studios, is relatively easy. The equipment's very cheap, comparatively cheap, and you can do it. But creating something magical, mix-wise, production-wise, that still takes a bit of experience, just like anything else. I mean, I hate to sort of bring brain surgery into it, but I mean, maybe someone will come out with a brain surgery kit that you can actually do at home, but it does have its dangers. Maybe you're better off getting a surgeon who's done it for 30 years, and bit crazy analogy there, but it's the same thing. So people are sending me their tracks. One of the first things is the drum sound. If it's a rock band, it's very hard to get a big, Zeppelin-like or Beatles-like great drum sound at home. So I said, right, I'll tell you what, I can make this sound great. That's if the music is good, and there is a lot of great music out there. I'm on a lot of music sites. Music X-Ray is one of them, where there's hundreds, if not thousands, of artists and musicians and songwriters, many more than there were when I started out, because it's a much bigger, broader music business now because of the TV, and everyone wants to have a go, and it looks like it's easy, So, you see, the thing is that I am a musician myself. I always wanted to be in a band. Well, I was in a band. I was a singer in a band. But my job is now, and has been for many years, is record producing, engineering. So it's a job. That's what my job is, and I kind of picked up quite a lot, so I'm probably quite good at it now. I ought to be after all these years, you see. So, but it is still a job, and I try and tell people it's a job just like any other. All right, maybe a little bit different, but one of the things is that a lot of youngsters, because I'm a record producer, and not everyone knows what a record producer is. So with some of the clients, I have to spend the first couple of days telling them what I do and explaining to them that I also charge for what I do, because they've got this misinterpretation that it's a bit like a film producer, and that I'm going to pay for everything, I'm going to do everything, which is what film producers do. And I say, oh God, you got that wrong. I'm like a film director is what the comparison is. Film producer is record producer is much different. It's like the arranger, it's getting the sounds, it's so I kind of sometimes have to explain it to youngsters. And I don't know if it's not a dying art. It's just that people don't, unless they've studied it, they don't know what's involved. So, in the past, when I was working at the Soul Studios for Gus Dudgeon, Elton's producer, obviously it was a different world for me then. He's already working with the artist. I'm his engineer, I'm his producer. Or when I was working with Jimmy Page, running his studio. But now I'm working with the general public, as it were, which is a little bit frightening. But it's also exciting, because, people walk through this door, like maybe a kid. Well, it's not really a kid. They might be 24, 25 years old. We're about to record a demo of theirs. And I say, how many times you've been in the studio? And say, this is my first time.
Yeah. What
is that all about? I can't relate to that. It's very difficult. But it's also exciting to see someone progress, and then to use my talents to be able to explain to them that there's the vocal mic, but it's not just for singing in, it's for acting in, and it's for, so it's obviously good to be able to use all the experience that I've gained over these years that unless you start using it and explaining it, you don't even know that you've got it, do you?
Is there a difference now as opposed, I mean, when you were a teenager working for I mean, you were a young kid, your parents let you out of school to do this, but we'll still get people coming up to us and say, what do you think of this? Of course, it happens all the time. And I'm from the school as, well, you ask me and I'm going to tell you what I think of this. Has it changed for you? Because back then you were asked for advice from young musicians probably all the time. And now you're doing it still. Has the temperament, can they take criticism now? Is it changed from back then?
No one can take criticism, really. I mean, the music business is maybe worse, I don't know. Everyone says, go on, tell me what you really think. Tell me what I want you to be honest with me. They don't. No. We don't. We only want you to be honest if it's good news. We don't want to know that it's shit, it's crap, it sounds awful. Okay, really, but we say that. We say, go on, I can take it. Tell me what you think. But the thing is that when I was you mentioned Dick James, where I started work when I was 15. And that was the biggest eye-opener, was going from school to now working in this amazing music publishers and meeting all these musicians. And one of them being Reg Dwight, as you know, became Elton John. And I was a musician and singer, and that's all I cared about anyway. So now seeing it taking place, Beatles sheet music being made, all my heroes, So I've been very, very lucky and blessed, really, to have had this path almost laid out for me, especially in the early years. I was just very lucky. I just fell into this, fell into that. Work with all these amazing people. I mean, and you realize just quite how amazing they were and are years later when they're still selling billions of records, Then we formed Rocket Records, which was our own record company. We were offered a band called Queen. We turned them down compared to some of the bands that were around in 1972. Queen were just like, there's some nice guitar harmonies going on there, but, they wanted $200,000 or something, which was, you got to be kidding, We might pay that for the Rolling Stones, but we're not paying it for this band. But, so I've been very spoiled, really. But you did ask me about, I used to be an A&R as well at Dick James, so people would come in off the street, they'd sit down, play guitar in front of me. That's not possible to people now. I think that's probably, obviously thinking about it, that's why people are furiously recording on their phones, which drives me absolutely mad. Someone sent me a demo yesterday, and I said, you know what? A phone isn't a recording instrument. It's for making telephone calls and speaking to people. If you're serious about your music, get a tape recorder, like we had. I was making demos on a tape recorder, Revox tape recorder, when I was 9 years old, and we were getting into it, with the recording, and they weren't bad recordings. And it's like the sound has sort of regressed. I mean, you get an idea of what's going on by recording someone on a phone, but you can't hear the quality of their voice or, the quality of the instrument. So it's in some ways the music's got degraded sound-wise, quality-wise, industry-wise, the way people go about, putting the music together. I can go on like this for days, John. I mean, you see, one big difference was when we used to go in, if you thought you had a talent, or your uncle and auntie thought you were talented, what would you do? You'd go to a recording studio. A commercial recording studio, says recording studio over the door. You go in there, there'd be an engineer, hopefully, who's been doing this a little while, knows what he's doing. If you were lucky, you might also get to use a record producer who also might know what he's doing. I mean, this happened to 4 guys from Liverpool, didn't it? They'd never been in a studio. Well, I don't think they'd been in a studio. Maybe they had in Liverpool, but they got the chance to come down to London. This was luck. I mean, you talk about luck, and you talk about a path laid out. So they got the opportunity to come down to London to work in the best studio on the planet, with the best possible producer, and what I also say is that great music was made by teams of people, and unfortunately, this is the other difference between now and then, is a lot of music is only being made by the one person, And I don't think that magic music that's going to last for 100 years, it's not easy for one person to create that. And I also say this crazy thing is that we used to call those bands. When unfortunately and very unfortunately, not long after Jimmy Page bought the studio where I was managing and everything, the Mill, Bonham was found dead. I was getting all geared up to record Zeppelin, and I'm sure that's why Jimmy bought the studio. But he died not long afterwards. So it was quite a while before Jimmy actually came in the studio. And actually, the first thing we did was mix Coda. We put together that tribute album. We did think that I thought that Bonham would be replaced maybe by Simon Kirke, who is an amazing drummer with Bad Company. But obviously, that's the sort of band that Zeppelin were. Zeppelin was those people. See, that's a good example of how important a band is when one member isn't there. And you could say that the drummer's not even a proper musician. I shouldn't say that, should I? That's terrible. But some people say that. He's the drummer, he's not a musician. Anyway, but obviously such an integral, important, you're not a drummer, are you?
Yes. So is my son.
No, you're not. Anyway, he was such an integral part of the band that without him, the band's that was the band. But anyway, eventually he came in with Paul Rodgers, and we did the Firm, and that was done live in the studio. Even Paul was singing live, which I assumed we'd redo, and he's so live that I'm not singing that again. I just did it. Did you get it? Good. That's it.
I was at a concert in Vancouver, because I'm not sure if Paul still lives there, but he did for a while. And I looked across, and I remember looking, I'm going, wow, that guy over here in this small club, that guy looks just like he was with a lady, probably his wife. I don't know that much about Paul.
Definitely.
But I remember looking across him going, well, he's not a large man. And I remember going, that's got to be Paul Rodgers. And everyone was looking at him, and everyone was too intimidated. One of the greatest singers of all time to talk. What was your experience like working with him?
Actually, Paul is Canadian.
Is he?
When I looked him up the other day on Wikipedia, and it's down as English, British stroke Canadian. So he fell in love and married a Canadian lady. I think she was a beauty queen. And he's obviously got, what nationality now of Canada. So I'm sure he still lives there, But working with Paul was, it did have its ups and downs, I suppose, but there were definitely more ups than downs. That guy, like I say, when we did the Firm, it's like it's magic. That's magic happening in front of you, because all you're worried about is that the machine doesn't break. You're sitting there while they're doing the take, just praying that nothing goes wrong here, because this is it. Because it's a performance that is only going to get repeated in this way if I've recorded it properly, So he's probably, Elton John is an amazing singer as well, and I've been lucky to work with amazing singers. But you got to say, Paul Rodgers is just it, really. And then we did what did we do? We did the Firm that I was talking about. But then he formed a band with Kenny Jones, called The Law, and similarly we did that in a big studio. Can't remember what it's called now. Big studio, and he would do the same thing. I'd say, well, we're going to do the voice again. He'd say, what for? I just did it. That was it. I'm not singing it again. I think once we were doing something, and halfway through he said, stop. I said, what's the problem? He said, oh, I've got a problem. He said, I made a mistake. I said, well, it's all right. We can drop in. He said, drop in? What are you talking about? I'm not dropping in. I'll have to go back to the beginning and start again. So that's, and Paul, you know, he's just a natural. He's just, I mean, of course, he's a good songwriter as well, but he's just the most brilliant singer, basically. So it was an honor. It was an honor to be in the control room with him out there, definitely. Which is quite a long story. When Steve Brown started working at Dick James, I was then working in the cutting room. So you went from office boy to cutting room. And that used to be a hangout place for the musicians, you know. It's the place where we first played the White Album, for goodness sake, you know. I was given, because we're the Beatles publisher, I was given the tapes of the White Album. I said, does anyone want to come in and hear the new Beatles album? Well, you know, it was wall-to-wall people, Elton included. And we're listening to one track after another, just almost falling over with everything. And in fact, something I'm going to tell you now, on this Zoom interview that really people don't know across the world, that is that he's gay. No, that's not it. No, is that Elton John never thought to be a singer and never thought to do concerts at all. Never thought to be a performer. I promise you that is true. He was focused on songwriting, and that was it. He was in a background, you know, he was in a band with Long John Beaudin playing piano, and during the day he'd be doing sessions as a pianist, sometimes as a singer, but mainly as a pianist. And it was really only told to him, because I was trying to, you know, later on I was in A&R and I was playing his songs to other artists, because we were music publishers, we weren't a record company. And people weren't really interested, to be honest. They probably thought they were a bit too personal. You know, they probably thought that I can't do that. It's a bit too personal. I remember sending songs to Ray Charles and all sorts of people. So it was put to him that if he wants his music out there, he better sing them himself. He better record them himself. And that's what happened, you know. And then once he'd sort of started recording, it was put to him that he ought to be promoting himself. So that's why he started doing gigs, you know.
But in the beginning, was he not doing, for his songs, was he not doing guide vocals anyway? Would he not do that, try to sell his songs?
Well, he was doing the vocals. He was doing demos, absolutely, piano and voice demos. Well, yeah, but he wasn't, like I say, you know, it's incredible to think back. Things seem to happen so fast, to be honest. One day he's doing this. One day we've done an album. Next week we've done Tumbleweed. I mean, although it didn't seem fast at the time, you know, within a few years he's now selling records. He's becoming a big star. But it seemed to drag on, the whole process, really, of him just being a songwriter, writing a song for Eurovision, and then making Empty Sky, where you thought, wow, he's singing well, and these are like. Because this was Steve Brown's idea, you see. When Steve Brown came on the scene, he was quite into underground, which is what we used to call it, underground music. And Elton's writing all these pop songs. So he said to him, you know, isn't that a bit crass, a bit, you know, can't you write something a little bit more intelligent? I don't think he actually put it in those words. But, and Elton said, yeah, you know, I've got some ideas. And then, you know, he started writing these semi-classical songs and got in touch with Bernie, who writes these amazing lyrics, you know, and so that's how that developed. And it was a process of development, being egged on by us who just thought he was brilliant, you know, in the record company, in the music publishers, is like a lot of people, you know, and that's, if we get back to your question, which is how does it differ from now, is that youngsters don't have that backup. You know, I mean, good luck trying to get signed to a record company. You more or less got to be successful before they'll look at you. And the whole idea of Dick James and then Rocket was to sign embryonic talent, to bring it on and to tell them what's possible and to put money into them and to, you know, to believe in them. And that job's very much left to producers like myself or managers. You really almost have to have it all done before a record company can go, all right, we'll pick you up. So the development process is not really the same at all. On the flip side, we could release this conversation to iTunes, and it would be available across the world for anyone to hear or to buy. Whereas when we were at Dick James, we used to have to go to the record shop and say, "Have you got the latest Elton John single or whatever it is?" And they go, "Elton what? Who? Elton who?" That a lot of people used to say. And that was one of our publicity campaigns. It said Elton who. But now, obviously the that side of it is available to everyone. Everyone can be out there with a...
Yeah.
But in saying that, you still got to promote it. I don't really know whether much has changed. The technology, of course, it's changed. In some respects, very little has changed. And also when it comes to the next big thing, whatever that is, I tend to, when I hear it, relate to it, if it's pop music, if it's rock. I must admit, John, I don't know where all the bands have gone. That's one thing. I don't know where these bands have gone. All I can think is, whenever 4 or 5 or whatever people get together, as soon as there's a slight difference of agreement, it finishes.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And bands was all about disagreement. It was all about rows, shouting. You don't know what you're talking about. You stick to what you do. I stick to what I do. Bands was a very strange but amazing situation.
Yeah. Well, Lennon and McCartney is the ultimate example of two guys who had, who loved each other and didn't, and competed against each other and roasted. I mean, my best work has been done because I considered myself an underachiever, and then I went, no, I want to be more like that, or anything, any other statement you want to put in here,
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of that whole sort of concept of it seems to be different, whereas everyone's sitting in front of a one screen, with a few instruments and trying to make it happen. And I've got a sort of a radio show that I do every Friday morning, and people send in all sorts of new recordings and all sorts of things. And, we'll play something and I'll go, wow, that's a really good band. What's their name again? And they'll say, no, I should say it's one person. So we can't go and see them then. No, it's not a band. And I'm doing that myself anyway. What am I talking about? If you go onto my website, on the front page, it's 2-3 tracks. It's mainly all me. So, we're all sort of guilty of it, I suppose. Getting onto the Elton John album, which was the first major production, obviously, by Gus. This was a new producer come in now who Steve found. And, these songs are semi-classical. I mean, he'd have never have written those without those words. The thing is that the song is the result of the words. Elton doesn't sit on the loo or something or go shopping and he's get a tune in his head, as far as I know. The way Elton writes songs is that he gets a lyric in front of him, generally from Bernie, and he decides if it's going to be a ballad or what it's going to be, and then he writes the song. He's a genius, and then the melody comes to him and the chords come to him and he's away. So in answer to your question, there wouldn't have been an Elton John but for Bernie. I don't think. Not in anything like the same way, you got to say,
I talked to David Henschel about working with Gus, but also working with Richard Perry. And I'd heard, you're the first guy I'd heard that talking about Gus Dudgeon in the way that he would have multiple takes with the band and sometimes piece it together, which is very Richard Perry, because Richard would drive people crazy because they always said Richard Perry had a photographic memory and he'd have all these tapes and he'd know exactly what Gus was like that as well?
Absolutely like that. And he would not only drive everyone mad, but he would specifically drive me mad when I was his engineer. But in a very nice way. See, the thing is that when Gus came on the scene, I was already working with Elton. I was already at Dick James, and And when Gus came on the scene, we all looked at him as in a bit of, well, what's he going to be like? I didn't actually know that he'd done David Bowie's Space Oddity or Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. Didn't really know his history. I mean, and I thought Steve Brown was a perfectly brilliant producer, and I thought Empty Sky was totally amazing. Mm-hmm. And Lady Samantha, the single that he did with, I thought they were all brilliant. Great. That was a great projection for Elton, I thought, from what he was doing, which was the pop stuff. And now we're doing this rock stuff. So it was pretty much Elton John and Hookfoot, which was, I thought, can't get better than that. But the amazing thing with Steve is that he was always searching for something even better. So we had these demos that were done at Dick James of the new album, which is Your Song, Border Song, Take Me to the Pilot, all these songs. And Steve's, they went round of George Martin and all sorts of producers. No one was really interested, to be honest.
We'll have part 2 of our interview with Stuart Epps coming up real soon. Keep in mind, he is taking new clients as an engineer-producer. He'd love to produce your stuff, and he's excited about new music. Go to his website, stuartepps.co.uk. I'm John Beaudin. Make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. Buy a t-shirt, buy a hat. We have brand new hats for Rock History Book, this channel, and Rock History Music, Rock History Canada. You can join our Patreon, get early access to all our videos. This is Rock History Book.